Tēnā koutou e te iwi. Ha ki te ha, manawa ki te manawa. Tihei mauri ora. Kia rongo koutou ki te reo irirangi or Tune Me In podcast.
Martin, thank you so much for coming in. Here we are, day 3, final day of MENZA conference. And what have you been doing at the conference so far?
So kia ora, thank you for inviting me into the podcast room. I see this conference for me, there's three goals for me. One is to reconnect with music teachers that I have been connecting with for the last 15, 20 years. So some people I only see every 2 years. And it's like, how you doing? What's happening? Last time you were talking about this situation at your school that wasn't so good, or the situation was amazing. What has happened with that? And sometimes that's really helpful for them to go, oh yeah, I was really complaining about my workload or my talking about my jazz band or something like that. Actually, yeah, I've solved that now. I'm actually doing this, or, that kind of thing. Other thing is meeting new people that I haven't met before and really keen, there's a few teachers in their first 2 or 3 years, which is really cool. And always meeting primary teachers because they are amazing and never really get to connect with them much. And the third thing for myself, because I work for the Ministry of Education, looking at resourcing the curriculum and writing the curriculum across different learning areas, including the arts, is intel gathering. So going, okay, what are teachers doing in the classroom? What are the great things, of course? Who are people doing interesting things? Who are people making good resources, or people that are doing great teaching and don't realize that what they're doing is they've got a really good angle on it or something like that. Like I was talking to someone who does a really good kind of like a whole day of itinerant DJ stuff in a school, and kind of going, okay, cool. So that's a person that down the line, if someone asks me about something, I'm like, hey, go to that school, go to that teacher, trying to connect that up. And also just trying to expand the people that are involved in supporting teachers, because often we go to the same people to help with resources or do with conferences or be speakers and things like that. And it's always, I think, really important to keep new people coming on board. Like I think of myself, I was on the board for 6 years for MENZA. Someone just invited me along to come on, and that was really important in my growth. And you have the same thing where, like I said, hey, Ben Lau, you should come on MENZA kind of thing. We went to university together, and it's kind of like that succession. We've got to, it's not like I've disappeared and haven't kind of never been involved again, but it's kind of, I think it's really important to keep, new people on, and it's that intel gathering I see from a kind of, in a nice way, intel kind of thing, yeah.
Just kind of scoping out what's actually happening with people in their classrooms, and I would assume then sharing the wonderful things you find.
Yeah, sometimes it's actually just sharing from my back pocket. So I've got something in my back pocket if I'm in a conversation somewhere sometimes. So kind of like informally, where, I'll be in a conversation with someone and I'll be able to say, yeah, well, actually, I saw a really good, I give an example from the drama conference I was at last year, where there was a combined music and drama class with year 7 and year 10, I think it was, down south. Really interesting how they got that happening and timetabled, and amazing how that worked. So then when I was having a conversation with a colleague and we're thinking about how we write things, and I'm going, oh, we've got to remember this isn't just for music teachers. What happens if they're teaching in a combined class? What happens if they're teaching with another subject, or it's multiple levels? And because sometimes it's very difficult to share formally some of these things.
Yeah, well, what are the outlets for that anyway?
I think doing short little kind of opportunities of writing about what you're doing, an example of what you've done, of how you've made some decisions or something like that. Like there was a discussion yesterday at one of the workshops about how a teacher broke down students forget what they do when they're composing. And so they said, oh, hey, make a little reflection about what you did with the bass, what you did with the drums, what you did with keys and things like that as you go. So then they don't forget, as opposed to waiting to 10 weeks later, tell me what you did. And we can't remember what we did or why we made those decisions. So little tidbits like that, I think other people need to know about it. And, I think there's a really low, it's not actually too difficult to just write a 1-page, 200-word thing for the MENZA magazine or for something else and get those thoughts on page. And I think that's
Yeah, that's awesome. I was just going to say, submit to the Tune Me In magazine for MENZA. And we have lots of options. If you just want to write 100, 200 words, that's really enough, like just to get a conversation started.
Yeah. Also, you could do it where you don't actually write it, where you are collating other people's ideas. Like there's a little series where I interviewed musicians that have a non-traditional background that are working in the music industry. That was a few threads in previous Tune Me Ins. That was really helpful because I was like, I want to contribute, but I don't have time and I don't want to. Didn't feel like I had anything to say at that stage. But I was coming across some great people doing some cool things. So I was like, okay, here's 5 or 6 questions. And it was also really interesting in that interview process where these people who don't consider themselves proper teachers, perhaps, if they don't have teaching degrees, even like people that are keynotes sometimes have that imposter syndrome because they talk into a room of educators and don't have a teaching degree or something like that. It was really kind of affirming for them as musicians, I think, as well.
Yeah, and just shining the light on their practice and giving them the space.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, and then hopefully some teacher will read it or some kid will read it and go, oh, that's a non-traditional, with inverted commas, about how they're doing what they're doing. So that's potentially an option for students that are in my class.
Yeah, so it's about visibility and showing people what the possibilities are and representation in a way.
Yeah, yep, totally. And also I think, there's definitely often secondary school music teachers are quite noisy. There's a lot of us, and that's my background. And it's kind of going, we need to give space and voice for other areas in ECE, itinerant, community music, so that's kind of a little bit of a challenge to people, anyone listening to this, if you work in a non-secondary space, want to hear from you guys.
Oh, completely. Especially our ECE brothers and sisters. I trained as an ECE teacher, so I have full respect for those of us who are, there doing the free play, just creating the environment where students lead the way, where they can choose their own adventure and just very Piaget and actually just engage with the environment and learn by doing. And it can actually be really hard to take that back seat and just be there to facilitate. And I used to have a guitar that my father bought me that I would take with me to the Early Childhood Centre. And I was working with infants and toddlers, and we'd just sit on the mat together and they would explore the guitar. And it was magical. Those ideas of regulating their own emotions through music or through verbalizing and musicking and those kinds of things. It was really satisfying for me as a teacher, even though I wasn't doing any direct instruction at all.
Yeah.
It's very, very cool. I need to go back to some early childhood centres. Fill my cup again. Yeah, they're just not pretentious at all. They're just very authentic at that age.
Yeah.
And I think we do grow out of that, don't we?
Yeah, realise a bit more embarrassment and things year 7, year 8. Stop thinking they can sing and things like that.
Yeah, that makes me very sad because everyone can sing. Everyone has that voice. And one thing I heard was that you can't be, if you're singing, you're not stressed. And if you are stressed, then you probably can't sing. You have to feel free to sing. Yeah, so tell me more about your teaching career.
Yeah, 20 years ago I started teaching. I taught social studies and tourism because that was the only jobs that were around when I graduated halfway through the year. But then they quickly found out I had a music degree and started teaching music in secondary school, but at area school with year 7 and 8s who were really tiny and small, and I thought I'd crush them. And I came from a musicology background, classical jazz kind of thing, but also having a record collection because I wanted to have jazz records, and that turned into DJing my records to play them to other people, which is what I kind of did at university alongside. And then I had opportunities where I worked retail, so I got an opportunity to work at the rock shop because I could play piano. So I worked in the electronic department, recording software, DJ gear, microphones, without knowing anything really. Not knowing as much as I really felt I should have. But I spent lots of nights reading magazines. So we would sell magazines, about 4 or 5 different magazines, one of which is called Sound on Sound, still being produced today. And if the magazines didn't sell, we'd cut the letterheads off and post them back to the distributor to get reimbursed. And so then we had these magazines left over. So I would take them home. And my first teaching job, I had this huge stack of magazines. And that's how I learnt lots about everything that I know about music technology was from 3 years of reading those magazines, and also practically plugging in stuff and having to sell 6 or 7 different digital audio workstations. And so that kind of set me on a bit of a trajectory where I'm a teacher, but also, and kind of more kind of classical jazz trained, but I also have this sort of electronic side. And so then I went overseas, worked in Central America, doing TESOL to really, really poor schools in Nicaragua. And that was kind of like guerrilla teaching, where you've just got a whiteboard, no power, no electricity, 50 kids in a class, and it's like 35 degrees. So it was a very amazing experience, crazy difficult. And you come back here and the PPTA was complaining about class sizes of 35 and I'm going, 50 or 55 was my record,
Yeah.
But I came back and started doing a lot of relief and also some part-time teaching, and then that morphed into full-time teaching. But what I ended up realizing is that I was able to support students that would come to my school, most students, and I could support the person that wanted to be an orchestral kid or, kind of rock contemporary, electronic and recording and that kind of stuff, and really saw that opportunity. And then I had teachers nearby that were wanting support as well because they didn't know what to do. Because if we're thinking this is kind of like early kind of 2012, 2013, tech was getting cheaper and cheaper, more and more accessible. You could get a pretty good recording set up for kind of like $1,000 at that stage. And so I got more and more involved in helping teachers outside of the classroom. That was taking me outside of the classroom, traveling to Australia, traveling around New Zealand. And then I was kind of going, okay, and started having more questions about how do you design professional development? What is these myths of teachers thinking just because they're born before 1980 that they are, whether they're a digital native or whether they're a dinosaur, and before I've even talked to them, they've already had someone tell them that they're going to struggle with this tech.
Yeah.
So kind of having lots of those questions. And then I managed to get a PPTA scholarship to do my master's. So I did a master's in a year. It was wild and amazing. And it kind of just opened up even more kind of can of worms in a positive way, just kind of looking at professional development. I have a post that I wrote on my website how I learnt more in 4 weeks of study about assessment than in 12 years of teaching.
Yeah.
Because I'd never taken the chance to think about why we assess. And it kind of opened up that, and then that turned into a doctorate where wanting to continue investigating how teachers construct curriculum. What does it mean to do with digital technology? And that kind of journey. But it was one little thing. I had some advice from one of my associate teachers when I was first studying, and he said, do one thing outside of your school. When I was saying, hey, how can I be an awesome teacher? Blah, 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 blah. And this teacher said, do one thing outside of the school. And so then all through my teaching going, okay, I got involved in like a draft rewrite of the social sciences curriculum in 2006, I think it was. And then I got involved in, MENZA, and then I got involved in ended up doing more than just one thing outside of the school. At one stage I had like 7 things. But that kind of gave me that outside perspective, and also that what people would call now like a side hustle.
Yeah.
Which side hustle in a positive way, going, actually, you need to have this outside perspective. And then if stuff turns to custard or an opportunity arises, there is other ways that you can submit your, get income, but also find avenues and things. So I was getting really fulfilled with some of my work outside of school. Yeah. That helped kind of temper some of the usual frustrations that you have with inside of school and things like that. Yeah. And so that's kind of like something which I've quite remembered. And I think teachers that sometimes are just in their school doing their own thing and really struggling, just being in a room with 5 or 6 other teachers for a MENZA board conference thing, and you just learn stuff, and I think of some of the conversations you have in a taxi to somewhere or over lunch. Yeah, really helpful.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, so I think it gives you that perspective. I also think that then in the end, I was, again, very fortunate with some of the positions I've had with contracting with NZQA or Ministry of Education or other providers, that then when it came for me to do full-time study but need more income, that I was able to, leverage some of that and have an opportunity to have a bigger impact for not just the students in my school, because then I started helping teachers around New Zealand, and then influencing like tech companies about how they do education, because education's super important. They've got only a finite amount of money, the companies, so let's spend it right and do it properly and don't do some rubbish resources. And so it's kind of being able to leverage that with the experiences that I've had from, when you've done, 100 workshops over a couple of years, like you get really good at it and you get really good at reading a room. But then also you realize, if you've walked into 50 classrooms, now I can walk into a music classroom and even not talking to anyone, get a bit of a vibe and know what's happening and go, so all that sound gear in the corner's got lots of dust on it.
Yeah.
And there's not enough cables. Or kind of going, hey, so that's the flavor of this room. So this is what they value. This is, you just get that sense. And I got that then when I was doing assessments of teachers for universities, lecturing and things like that. You go into a primary classroom and you're assessing, I'm not doing the arts, but it's whatever I'm assessing them for. You get that flavour, and I think that's just a privilege to be able to have been in front of a bunch of places. Yeah.
It sounds to me like in Reggio Emilia approach to teaching and learning, the environment is the third teacher.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Yeah, you walk in and there are signs everywhere that tell you what's valued and how people relate to each other. It's all there written in black and white in the environment.
Yeah, and that's the same, like I think of that physical environment, like our orchestra was getting bigger and bigger at school, and the biggest place we could rehearse was, we had, one music classroom, and it was that. And in the end, it got so painful having to move all the desks out every Tuesday morning and moving the desks back, because they have to put them in the corridors and things, that I was just like, let's just get rid of the desks. And so we got these kind of like long tables on wheels, kind of like you have at universities and things, where you can flip the table so that they're kind of vertical and you can push them aside. And then we ended up using them quite well for like baffles with like the brass section and things like that as well. And it just kind of actually totally changed how I taught as well. So I went from a desk to like a lectern to then like sometimes not having the lectern. And it was very, still didn't get it quite right. And there's multiple teachers using the space and things like that. But it was a bit of a change, and it kind of really, kids come in and there's nowhere to sit at the desk, but then that makes this space where you can set up the band better, or a live band. And yeah, it's kind of like drama and dance. It's their bread and butter, always having to rearrange rooms for that. And
it just made me think of, oddly enough, post-humanism.
Yeah.
And how objects have agency and they can determine how people interact with them. So, for example, we're sitting here at this table. If this table wasn't here, we wouldn't be in this position. So, while I struggle with inanimate objects having agency as an idea, they do still have influence. Like they shape how we interact with them just through their own properties. And that's what made me think of what you're saying about having the spaces and the equipment, tables, chairs, moving them around, having to do all of that kind of legwork before you can even start.
Yeah. And so there's two things there that made me think of. One is kind of like having all your gear plugged in when you're being creative, or having your art gear, wherever it is, ready to go. So when you have 15 minutes, you can do stuff. You don't have to spend ages plugging in things. It's one side, but there's the other kind of like view of kind of social materiality, where the social and the material go together, and that's where people have that meaning. So kind of thinking about what your value as a teacher, how you're constructing your curriculum, what you're actually doing, and thinking about the influence of those spaces and what the students bring into the classroom and how that goes together. And yeah, one perspective is that, the physical things are very important.
It's interesting, but it kind of makes my head hurt a little bit when I think about it. Spend too much time lingering on the power of a drink bottle, for example.
Yeah. But it's definitely like kind of just thinking, if we're going back to someone walking into your space and going, what do you value? And kind of going, also that aspirational thing of going, okay, if you set up the gear, they will come, kind of thing. If you're wanting to slightly change your practice or try something out, or like I think of the DJ workshop that I did, going, okay, if we spent $500 on a DJ controller, where can I integrate this into my school? Do I make a beat club at lunchtime and to see how it goes? Because you want to kind of keep an eye on the gear and things like that. You can't just leave it out. It's not like an acoustic guitar. Or maybe you should. Maybe there's some constraints or some cope-up about how you use this gear depending on your situation.
And that just brings me to this idea of choice, teacher choice, because we could feasibly teach anything. Like the sky's the limit for how we could do digital music, classical music, jazz, contemporary. The world is filled with endless music, and there's always more getting created. But we can't do all of it. We have to make choices. So how do teachers negotiate that?
So my research, which you can read about pretty easily, is two things about how teachers make curriculum decisions. So I managed to get a large chunk of New Zealand secondary music teachers to respond to a survey and some case studies. And there's two ways that teachers make those decisions. First way is they think about the students in front of them. They consider the students in front of them this year. Not talking about those students 5 years ago that were really amazing, or those kids 5 years ago that were into reggae and this year they're all metalers. This is a real story. It happened to me kind of thing. Like metal, chugga, chugga, chugga. Like you got to change what you got to do. So they think of students in front of them. That influences what they decide to do and value and what they're going to do this year. They're all nuts about musicals, so let's try and figure. All the year 10s are nuts about musicals, so let's how it's going to be. That kind of level, all the way down to the granular level. And the second direction and driver for curriculum construction is how musicians make music in the real world.
Yeah.
Real world, what's the fake world? But it kind of if you understanding what I'm saying here is that how a musician makes music, then the teachers try and reconstruct that the best they can. And that's not just sort of you're trying to recreate what Lord's doing.
Yeah.
But it's also thinking of like the great covers band that played last night for the conference dinner, the Swedish Taboo, a Sade song. They are playing kind of neo-soul. They will also do some other, what's the word, more commercial pub gigs, not playing Wagon Wheel perhaps, but that kind of, but also it's kind of going, what does it mean to be a musician?
Yeah.
They also do their own original music, in different ways and in different groups and things like that. But it's like, okay, what do they need to know? They need to have good chops. They need to know there's a band, a PA, there's tech. They need to think about the room. They need to think about what they're playing, their set list, all this sort of stuff. That all informs teachers. And then the same thing of thinking about, okay, if a student wants to be in a string quartet, wants to be a classical violinist, what do they need to know? Yeah, they need to have amazing technique, but they also need to know how to stand when there's a microphone there, because you need to be able to be videoed and things like that. You need to know how your instrument reacts in a different spaces and things like that as well, in rehearsal rooms, and to make yourself the best possible. Because you're not just, for instance, you need to be able to know how to record yourself. Yeah. Because you're going to do some demo sometime, some audition, or you want to try and sell some money, or you're maybe going to make, sell some music. You're going to maybe do some resources or make something, you're going to need to interact with, for instance, recording software. Even if you live in a very narrow world that, so it's kind of, there's that perspective. So if you're thinking of the students in front of you, thinking of the musicians making music outside the classroom, what that is, that's what influences what teachers do.
Okay. So, like, as you were talking, I was thinking, he's talking about Lucy Green's how musicians learn, like that informal peer-to-peer learning.
No, I'm not. There's influence of that. Like Lucy Green, for those of you that don't know, basically informal learning, you throw kids in a band room and they learn contemporary music. Contemporary music was music, 70s and 80s folk
through
music.
Osmosis.
Yeah. And that works to some extent, and that is one perspective. But what does that mean when you've got a kid with a laptop, and how do they work in the room? Like, it works with, white rock music kind of thing. Like, what does that mean? I'm saying, what does it mean for different genres, different styles, and how music is made now, and collaboration and things like that. There's that perspective, I think, taking away from Lucy Green, where the teacher doesn't know everything.
Yep.
They are not leading from the front per se. It's like, where are the resources? Where is directing the students to that great Twitch channel, that where Disclosure live stream how they break down all of their tracks and things like that. Okay, that's a great thing because they're all in, Logic or FL Studio, whatever they're in, and it's trying to find that, and that's the role of the teacher there. And there's also doing it with whatever gear you've got as well. Like, there was an interesting study where boys and girls were writing songs, and there was a difference where the girls would, this was kind of done in the 90s, I think, from memory, they would sit down and talk about how they're going to write their song, and then they would pick up their instruments and do it, kind of thing. As opposed to the boys would just start strumming away and bashing away and figure out what Vicky Thorpe calls that messy phase of composition as they're doing it. And that's a very binary discussion there. But considering kind of, okay, so yeah, it's not just straightforward. It's not like, how does that work for the different students and things like that as well? And particularly when you've got laptops and kids with headphones, how do you get them to take their headphones off? How do you get them to go and sample the saxophonist and then kind of talk to a kid that plays saxophone and go, hey, how about you sample that? Yeah, you've got other great samples and things like that, but how do you do that? And that's a real thing. Like there's a DJ Mag do quite a cool little series of how they make this track famous or something like that, and they've gone through classic dance tracks. And they'll go, yeah, we had this sample of a violin, but then we went and recorded a real violin and we mashed them together, and that just gives it a different flavour and a different lift. And it's like, okay, so how do we do that in the classroom?
So the other thing I was thinking about was like situational learning or legitimate peripheral participation. So these ideas that you go into like maybe a community music setting and you're a new participant, you're watching what people do, you're learning through watching. Slowly you take on more and more responsibility until you're at the center of this group. We can't really offer that in schools.
No. And there's also that gatekeeping perspective as well, where you've got to pay your dues, and particularly in the electronic side, DJing, there's so much gatekeeping. If you can't DJ on vinyl, you're not a proper DJ, and all this sort of stuff, which is really unhelpful when actually the more kids that start listening and playing music, the better kind of thing. And it makes them better musicians as well. And it makes them better producers, and it makes them better marketing people for whatever they're working for, So I think it's getting down to your students. What are they? Who are the students in front of you? What are the music that they're into?
Yeah.
How do I connect that? Also, kind of not getting too hung up perhaps on the bigger concepts versus the skills they're going to learning. Like if a kid wants to learn some finger picking style off some YouTube track because they saw it and it's cool. Yeah, start there, and then down the line, inevitably, I would claim that they would end up learning about scales and harmony and where that fits in that finger picking style that they're doing and the tradition, and the concepts and the wider musical geography would come along. But at the start, they're going, I just want to learn how to shred like this, or I want to recreate this track like that I've heard, and there's that kind of that tension where in NCA in the senior school we're assessing competencies, and then if that changes, or like if we're going to say more concepts or something like that, how does that marry up? But then it's also the students are going, hey, I want to learn this particular technique, for instance. Think of like guitar pedal fuzz stuff. They want to sound like that. If I don't know that, I could either feel inferior, or else I could be going, okay, how do I support the student with that?
Yeah.
And there's so many resources out there, and it's kind of trying to point the kids in the good direction and asking colleagues, and when you're onto something, sharing it, Like
the only thing I would add to that is like that example of a student using finger picking, and inevitably they'll come into contact with the notions of scales, etc. But at what point do they learn how to talk about that, like the language associated? Because like if they're just learning by doing and they never get the name of it, or they never get...
So you got to use the nomenclature, the the right terms and things, but it's kind of like the right terms. That sounds very gatekeepy, but kind of like, yeah, they do have to learn those terms, and it's when they can, that's that teacher perspective about going, at the moment they're just trying to figure this out, and then you're going, actually, just so you know, you're doing like an inverted chord. So later on when we talk about chords, that's what you're doing there, and you can see it physically on your fretboard, and it's kind of,
Okay.
yeah, it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all where you sit down and you show everyone about triads and then you all start playing the piano. And that's, how I started teaching like that 20 years ago, as opposed to going, we're going to play this song, we've learned it, or here's the different parts and things, and then, and by the way, you've accidentally learned about, a chord progression, and we're going to break it down, and then we're going to adapt it, and we're going to change it. And what happens if you do this or do that? Or when you bring the top note up to the bottom, it's an inversion. So what's the bass? Where's the bass line from? Okay, so you've made this, simple little walking bass line, or you've made, just kind of like trying to, when it needs to. But I think there's kind of like definitely like lines in the sand that a teacher will expect, even if it's unwritten, even if it doesn't exist in the curriculum, or if it is in the curriculum, or where a teacher will go, I expect in year 10 that kids can do X or Y.
Yeah.
That's appropriate for their instrument and as a musician.
What about students who really love music, but they're not interested in composing or performing? Like, is there still space for them to learn music?
Speaking as like a Ministry of Education employee, or totally. Like, I think of like some of my best sound people that are now working full time in the music industry as a sound person. He was rubbish at guitar in year 9, but I saw that this guy was my sound man, and from year 9, and I got to do something for them, So totally. I think there is that perspective where, if I think of drama and I go, should a kid be able to get through school and not perform on stage in drama? Is that okay or not? If they've designed lighting, if they've if to actually be a kid who's studied drama as opposed to a person who studied drama production, kind of thing. And I think about that in music, going, if they haven't actually got up and performed, where do they fit? What are they missing out on? It's kind of like that notation discussion where, if you have notation, if you know how to read guitar tab or standard stave notation, what's the negatives and the benefits of that? I think of students that get to year 13 and they were like, I really need to know how to read notation now. I haven't picked those standards. You've let me not pick them.
Yeah.
Have I done that kid a disservice? But it's them realizing, actually, year 13, I want to know how to do this, so I'll just start at, grade 5 Trinity, theory kind of thing.
Well, I was just talking about if a student isn't interested in performing or composing.
Yeah.
And the way I've been thinking about it, because my first subject is English.
Yeah.
And I started off on an analysis pathway, like reading the literature, analyzing it, and then I turned to a creative writing pathway. Like, is there a parallel from that kind of English where there's two sides of it? One where you appreciate and analyze and interrogate, and one where you create?
I think it's all yes and no. Both and, someone can be, the more you listen and great listening informs composition, and more listening informs performance. Like I say, the world's best covers bands are orchestras, because they have done the deep dive on recreating what someone has written with the information in the literature about how fast to do it, how to do those ornaments, all of that kind of stuff, just like a rock band does.
Yeah.
Just like me as a DJ, when I decide how am I going to play this song, am I going to play an edit, am I going to play the original, do I need to speed it up, do I need to slow it down, what's the context, who's dancing, who's not dancing, what am I doing there? I'm curating, and then that informs my writing. I know that if I play this song in a club and there's some big 8-inch subwoofers and I've got the bass too loud or the bass is too busy, then it's just going to blow everyone and make it not cool. It's kind of there's that context, but I think there's also definitely pathways for, if I think of kind of like the music management side and things like that, where there's definitely people that are involved in the music industry that aren't musicians traditionally, but they have a very good musical ear and understanding of, supporting artists, making sure that they're okay getting on stage and things like that. Like I watch a few vlogs of like DJs and things that travel around, and they've got like their video person, they've got their lighting person, they're DJing. Like, how does that actually work when they're touring on Europe on 10 days or something like that? Or I think of like playback engineers, like particularly with Glastonbury recently, like seeing lots of people that are doing all the backing tracks that are playing off their laptops, how they set that up, what they need to know, because they're looking on stage and realizing that actually there's a signal and they want to go back to the chorus again, or they want to extend that, and like how to, like they've got to be onto it because the whole thing will collapse. That's a new relative, it's a new role that, because the lights and the fireworks and the visuals and everything and the backing tracks and the click tracks and the monitors are all running from a laptop.
Yeah. It's a completely new way of doing things. Hey?
Yeah.
Cool. I think that did answer my question. Thank you for that. Now, I've actually kept you here for ages and you haven't been able to eat any of your lunch. So why don't I just ask you my summing up question, which is, do you have anything that you want to say specifically to music educators?
I think we've got we're privileged in that we can support students to be creative, and hopefully we can help them to be creative in music, because if we're music teachers. And I think we have to also ourselves as music educators consider what we're okay with for ourselves professionally and personally, and realize that those can be different. Your professional musical identity is different than your kind of, when you're teaching and things like that, what you support in your classroom, what you're into, that kind of stuff, compared to what you're doing in your personal life with music. And the challenge is when those are mashed together, and a teacher will find it very difficult to support a student to be creative in a way that is conflicting to themselves or conflicting with their own past experience, that they have someone who's really into the choral perspective, and they were traumatized from it, from their experience and things like that, or people trying to recreate how they experience music. Okay. And so I think there's that challenge, and there's that opportunity to do that kind of reflection about who am I as a music teacher or music educator, and then what does it mean in my personal life. And there's lots of research, lots of people talking about that, going, I'm a musician first and a teacher second, or vice versa, or whatever it is. I think it's really important to consider that, to enable you to keep being a teacher until you've been teaching for a long time, like Jenny Little. Woohoo!
Exactly. We spoke to her yesterday for this podcast. And just hearing you say that, it just made me think about a piece of advice I give to new teachers is to create space between yourself as a human being and yourself as a teacher, because we're always going to be criticized. People are always going to want to give us advice. And we should protect the core of who we are, so we're not taking all of that criticism or negativity into our souls. Because otherwise you end up doing a lot of crying as a teacher. Yeah,
but then there's also the opportunity of when you decide to bring your personal in. I remember sitting down with some seniors, and I was in a rock band that had formed with teachers from the school. And I was like, here's my set list for Saturday night. Here's our 2 set lists, and here's how we're putting it together. And this is what we're doing. And they were talking about it. And, they went into, some of the rock music that I was playing. I wasn't into it either, actually. But it was kind of like this conversation that we had where I could bring in that personal, or I bought my turntables and I did a gig, or then kids would see me performing sometimes in different scenarios. It's kind of like that opportunity to have that connection, to bring some of my personal in on my terms.
Yeah, on your terms. I think
that I'm okay with.
Yeah.
Because there's definitely lots of teachers that have no time to be creative for themselves, and if they're okay with that, then that's absolutely fine. If they can only do one thing, then that's okay. Or they're doing 50 things. Yeah. Just kind of being okay with it yourself.
Okay, I think that's a great place to leave it. Thank you so much.
Nā mihi whakanuia kia Bradley me te whare crescendo. Nā mihi anō kia Lions Foundation mō te putia tautoko. E te iwi, ko Jessica tēnei, mā te wā.